Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dual Access Podcast. My name is Andy Kriebel, and on each episode, I talk to somebody that's influential in data or entrepreneurship. And today, I have Tris Burns with me. Tris is a seasoned data analyst that's moved recently into coaching, and we're going to talk all about that today. So thanks for joining me, Tris.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's great to be here.
Why don't we start with you giving us a bit of background about how you started in data and kind of your quickly through to your journey of where you are now.
Absolutely. So I have a finance background by education. I graduated at a really great time known as the global financial crisis, and going into finance at that particular time was not very easy or advisable. So I got my start in my career in oil and gas in Australia, by the way. I should mention I'm from there originally, but in the UK now. And the first project I kind of got put on in oil and gas was basically building a CRM as a business analyst, which was fun. I didn't know what I was doing, but delivered the project on time and everything else, and realized that at the end of the project, we had no one to look at the data. I think it was around 2011 thereabouts, and data analytics wasn't that much of a thing back then. So having delivered the project as a BA, I was probably the closest to the data. So I said, let me have a try. So I had a go, and that was kind of where I first started dabbling in data analytics, pivot charts, Excel, working with Microsoft Dynamics as a CRM tool, reporting, dealing with stakeholders, and all of that kind of thing. That's where I got my start. I worked there for a few more years, and then eventually I got made redundant from that job, which you'll see as a common theme with me. So I finally got my wish finally came true in 2015. I moved to London and started working in investment banking, Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I wouldn't call it a typical or like standard data analyst role, but the role was all data. It was working with IBM Cognos, particularly building lots of reports on the trading floor for sales and trading data for those desks and those businesses. It was very full on. I loved the actual work that I did, but I didn't enjoy so much the environment. I don't know if anyone listening has ever worked on a trading floor, but it's pretty hectic. Most days were, finishing up around 11 o'clock, getting a taxi home and all of that kind of thing. But the work itself, I really enjoyed. The one downside to the work, though, there was that I was a small cog in what was obviously a very, very big machine. And it was very, I guess you didn't get to see the outcome of your efforts, the fruits of your labor as a data analyst in that kind of environment, because you'd make reports or you'd make recommendations and they'd go up to this person who would take it up to their person you'd never really see what decisions were made off the back of that. And that's something I found very frustrating and kind of unsatisfying in terms of being a data analyst in that kind of space. So I left banking and went into a tech startup in London called Digital Surgery, which was a very small outfit at the time, around 100 people. Week one, straight away, I was in the room with the founders and the COO and everyone else presenting my data, giving strategic insight, all that kind of thing. So I was really happy with that. Lo and behold, got made redundant not long after that. And I got tapped on the shoulder. But
you didn't get made redundant from Bank of America, right?
No, I left that one on my own volition. Yeah.
Right, okay.
No, I got tapped on the shoulder to come and head up the data and analytics function at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, which obviously a well-known brand, building their e-commerce capability to scale around the world, outside, of course, the US.
Great. And so you left that recently, back end of last year, roughly, right? And
2022 now, actually. Yeah,
2022.
End of 2022.
Okay. Yeah. And why did you leave?
Well, to be honest, I'd been there for 4 years, and it was the best job I ever had. I won't ever have anything bad to say about it, but it felt like a place where I'd done what I could do. It was growing. We'd scaled to loads of different countries. I'd built a team up from just myself to I don't know how many, but in different countries. We had team in the UK, the US, India, and Vietnam, and other places as well. We'd created the data infrastructure that was necessary to scale. We'd built out a really great CRO program, which I'm really proud of. enablement and tracking was a huge part of what we did. And of course, the BI side of things, which is more my kind of my area, was all kind of working pretty well. And if you didn't want to move to Dallas, Texas and be in the head office for Pizza Hut, there wasn't really anywhere to go. So I kind of figured that I'd done what I could do and I wanted to cut my teeth out there on my own.
Great. Yeah. So I want to go back to a couple of things then. You mentioned how dispersed the team was that you worked with at Pizza Hut. How did you manage the communication and, turning requirements over halfway across the world and making sure the work that you got back was high enough quality and you didn't spend too much time doing the communication bit? So how did you make that work?
A big part of the culture there was asynchronous work because the sun never set on Pizza Hut, right? It's a company that's no matter what day of the week, it's somewhere around the world, it's open. So you have to trust your teammates to do the work that they need to do while you're asleep. And then you need to check in on that while they're awake and they're sleeping. So I guess things are slower because it's never always live. There is crossover for a few hours of work between some of those jurisdictions, but you do have to, as a leader, be really trusting and give those people a lot of autonomy and let them know that you have faith in them to do a good job. Those were the people that I kind of looked after and managed. Different story, perhaps, when it's different stakeholders that you're not responsible for, and some of the challenges there's definitely, it's difficult to connect with business stakeholders who are very busy, got their plates full, and they also happen to be on the other side of the world. So there's like a 2-hour window that the two of you can get in touch. It's definitely challenging.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned how you're a frequent victim of the cuts at companies. How do you think those those aren't necessarily a bad thing? So of course you take it quite personally probably, and you feel like you really were doing your best for the company, but ultimately the companies they don't really care. You're just a name. How did that sort of shape your career direction then? You could take it one way or the other, right? You could take it as a slight against you and your capabilities, or you can see it as an opportunity to grow. How did that go?
Yeah. So both times for me, I have to say they were kind of inflection points. They were good. I was happy. Eventually good things came from them. The very first time I got made redundant was from, like I said, the oil and gas company. That was tens of thousands of people, billions of dollars project. I definitely didn't take that personally. The impetus for those layoffs was the global oil price in 2014, 2015 came down quite low, and the project was no longer feasible. Plus, it was close to being wrapped up. So I was pretty happy with that, and I got a nice little package to take away. The second time round, it came out of nowhere. It was a complete surprise. It was a startup environment, so I guess startups are always kind of living paycheck to paycheck in a sense. So thinking about it in that sense, it wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I didn't see it coming. But the really cool thing about that was that the people that I'd worked with there straight away started trumpeting me in their networks, and particularly someone who worked in HR there had an HR Slack group, and they put me in touch with a recruiter who knew someone or was that person at Pizza Hut, and next thing I knew, I was interviewing there. So it really didn't take me very long, and I was very lucky in that I had that strong network.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought that. So, for example, Salesforce is going through some more layoffs. Announced again. They have this whole idea of Ohana. We're all family, but ultimately, it doesn't really seem to matter that you feel like you're part of the family if they don't feel like you're part of the family, right?
Yeah.
They want you to have loyalty to the company, but the company's not going to have loyalty back to you, and it basically doesn't exist anymore, right? Companies can say it. The previous company I was at was fantastic. I mean, that's the most I've felt like being part of a family before. I never, they've never had to do layoffs or anything, but ultimately that could, every company might face that at some point. And I just think it's a lot of lip service. When you're coaching people, How do you kind of help them navigate that? Because surely you hear people say, "Oh, I really love this company. They're really good to me. It feels like a family." But ultimately, one day you could come in and they don't care that you gave everything to them because you're just a number, right? I'll let you answer that, and then I've got another
Yeah,
question.
I think the family frame for looking at a company is kind of unfortunate, to be honest. I think what's a better way to look at it is as a team, more like a sports team, where if you don't perform, you're on the bench,
Yeah,
or you're not getting um, called back, your contract's not getting extended. But if you do perform really well, you get tons of accolades. You're the star member of the team and all of
yeah,
that. So I think a team is a much better frame to consider a company than a family, first of all. So that would be one of the first things I would say to people. Other I know that in my experience through having been made redundant a couple of times, I had a manager who was let go at the same time as me, who had worked at that company
mhm,
for I think 7 or 8 years, and took it very, very personally. And at the time, I didn't quite understand just why he took it so personally. So for me,
yeah,
I guess I have a contractor's mindset to some extent. I didn't uh, see. I mean, obviously, you're losing your income and you're losing your daily habit and you're losing your colleagues who you're friends with at that stage, I suppose. But it's still transactional, right? Isn't it? The world of work.
yeah, yeah. Totally. Yeah, you're just a number on a spreadsheet. Ultimately,
Hmm.
you can think about as much as you want to feel like you're part of a family. Ultimately, you're just a line item. But I think it goes back. I personally, I feel like when a company has to do layoffs, especially a public company, that's a sign of really, really poor leadership.
Hmm.
So it could be communication, but ultimately, like if you have to lay somebody off, then you probably didn't need that person in the first place. So why are they there, right? How is the communication in the company happening that so many people are taken by surprise, right? To me, it's a major leadership issue, but the leaders are never accountable for it, right? They sometimes they get
Yeah.
huge raises just for
Yeah.
doing layoffs, right? Which is so ridiculous.
Well, they save the
Um,
company money, right? It's their goal.
yeah, yeah, but it's how do you feel about that? Do you think it's a management uh, a management issue where they I don't know, I'm not quite sure how to say it.
Yeah, it is a management issue. I think to be too, I don't want to sound like I'm coming off on the side of management all the time, but I think in some certain respects, it's difficult to have a crystal ball and see the future. Companies are optimistic; they want to grow, they want to have the people in place to help them grow. They may not necessarily have a great read of what's happening macroeconomically, such that the goal or the vision for growth that they thought was there is not, or the bottom has fallen out of that.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's maliciousness in it. I don't think there's necessarily uh, poor management in the first instance when they do go and hire too many people. But ultimately, that is probably the problem: too
Mhm.
aggressively hiring too many people
Yeah.
for ultimately the growth that you don't realize.
Mhm.
But then
Yeah.
if you saw another company that was growing and they were hiring all the time, very rarely do people turn around and criticize them and say, "Hey, hold on, slow down. You might have
Yeah,
to let
true,
your people go
true.
if things turn the corner."
Yeah. Do you think I read an article on LinkedIn the other day. I don't remember who posted it. I think Eva sent it to me. It was it was I think it was in response to the Salesforce layoffs. And the idea was, if you have to lay off 10% of your sales force, it should also be 10% of the management sales force. It should be 10% of the executive sales force. It should be 10%, pay cuts for the executives. But that never happens.
Mm.
Um, what do you think of that?
No, yeah, I think I would agree with that comment about it. It should be pretty equitable. A 10% of a management salary could be someone's entire salary down the line, right?
Yeah,
You're letting one
exactly.
person go, whereas you could just give someone else a minor haircut.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of led you into, you're your own boss now. So if you don't like your own boss, then you're kind of in trouble.
Some days
Um,
I do, some days I don't.
yeah. But if you get laid off by your own boss, then you only have one person to talk to.
Yeah.
Um, so what made you want to go kind of the entrepreneur route?
I have always dabbled in entrepreneurship. I don't talk about it too much, and maybe I should a little more, but I think I've started three little companies in my time, mostly marketplaces. So I had one a long
Mhm.
time ago with a friend where I love tennis, and he did as well. He does as well, and we created one of those kind of like a dating app matching local tennis
Yeah.
players in your area. Didn't have a clue what we were doing. Paid guys in India to build this thing, lots of money. Did no research, did no testing whatsoever. Just wanted an app, and of course it failed. But loved the experience and learned a lot from it. My wife and I, during up until COVID, had a photography marketplace. Actually, she's
Mm.
actually a marketplace designer by trade, so she's very knowledgeable, and it was doing really, really well up through 2019 and for the first part of 2020. But then when COVID struck, it died, unfortunately, and we closed it down. And I've done other little bits and pieces here and there. So I've always kind of wanted to do more than build someone else's project, if you know what I
Mm.
mean, like working for a
Yeah.
company. And that's not to take that away from anyone who does, but for me, I find it sometimes a little unsatisfying that I'm spending so much energy on building something that isn't actually mine in the
Mm.
end. And that's probably the crux of it. It's not so much the autonomy around my own time and working by myself so much, but just rather that I own the thing that I build, being the
Right.
most important thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And why did you move into career coaching instead of staying in data analytics?
Well, actually, initially, I didn't. When I left my job, I kind of left it open. I wasn't sure what I would end up doing. I didn't even really know that coaching was necessarily a thing, other than
Yeah.
how I would coach the people that I managed.
Right.
So I initially did some consulting as um, data like literacy consulting
Mhm.
and going into companies and helping them with like their data programs. I did that for a while. I enjoyed that, but I kind of felt a little bit like I was just back working at a job again, a little bit. And
You're just
all
not
the
an employee.
while, sorry.
You're just not an employee.
Yeah, but that kind of same kind of work sort of thing. Um, Jumping on calls and being in the meetings with
Yeah.
like 10 other people, that kind of thing. But all the while, people have reached out to me for conversations, asking me advice and checking in. And just slowly realized that um, I can be a mentor for people. That my experiences that I share quite often on LinkedIn resonate with a lot of people, and they are going through things that I've been through or seen other people go through, and I wanted to help them. I think at the end of the day, I like
Mhm.
I like people. I'm a people person, which isn't often something you necessarily hear from data people, but helping people who come up in their careers and overcome the things that I've either struggled to overcome or have overcome myself is really satisfying.
Yeah.
And I think it was a conversation I had with you, Andy. I wasn't even calling myself a coach until you said, "You're coaching people. Just call yourself that." And I was like, "Okay."
I
Back
remember
then, I
you
was
you
calling
weren't
myself a
sure
mentor.
what to call yourself, right? I was like,
Yeah.
well, just call yourself a coach. Yeah. So, um, given you started two companies before, you probably learned tons and tons of lessons from those, right? How do you apply those to your role now in coaching?
That's a really good question because they are vastly different. One thing that I will say is that particularly the first marketplace I launched, it was a matter of I know best. This is what we need. This is how it should look. This is how it should feel. This is what people want. I'm just going to go and build it. Now, this
Right.
time around, what's missing, sorry, from that process is user research, basically. Going and finding out would people actually well, first of all, do they actually have this problem? Do they want to invest to solve it? Would they use something that might solve it? So those are questions you need to ask yourself. And in I guess coaching and other kinds of solopreneurship, people will want to jump in and build products, build
Hmm.
service, build like courses, for example, or ebooks and everything else like that. And they might do that first. Whereas for me, like if I ever do those things, I'll do them last. Because right now I'm doing tons of user research, right? I'm speaking with data people all over the place and getting a sense from them what the problems that they're facing are and what the challenges that they have in their daily lives are, what kind of solutions they'd be interested in engaging with to fix those problems. So in a sense, I'm applying that kind of user research, user first approach with coaching, except that people kind of pay me to do the research, right?
What are some of the most common themes you hear then when you're coaching people?
So I'm primarily coaching people who are either in data leadership roles or very keen to like migrate into data leadership
Okay.
roles.
Yep.
For I'd say that the coaching kind of falls into two different camps. In one side, there's like the personal, like what they want out of their career, what their vision
Right.
for themselves is, where they want to get to in the next 5 years, etc. And the other side of things are troubles, tactical, strategic problems that they're having at work in regards to how well data is appreciated around the business, whether or not they fall into the IT division and see data as a business function, but unfortunately have got hearts and minds to change to make that the case. So if we just focus on that one, for example, people are wanting to become more influential leaders inside the organization. They want other stakeholders in the organization to get data and to use it. They want to have a place in the strategy conversation because they realize that data is crucial to that. And right now they don't. So what we do is we talk about, well, what things could you try, or what conversations could you have, or who could you team up with to help migrate towards a more data-centric culture?
Any huge wins you can share?
Well, they're all kind of personal, individual wins for the people that I work with. But yeah, so there's a few people who, having worked with them and helped them realize the problems that they have on the day to day, and going about those tactical things that I kind of just covered, and they've suddenly realized, I can't really move the needle at this organization. What I would be happier doing is actually going to a different company.
Yeah.
And then making that decision. So I think for a lot of people, they can butt their head against the wall for years and years and years, but then as soon as they have a powerful conversation with someone, they actually realize something about themselves, and that's it. They don't want this at all. They want something completely different.
Yeah.
I've had a few of those.
In your newsletter, you discuss strategies for effective data leadership. That's pretty much, it's a great newsletter. Well, first off, where can people find it? And what are kind of the common themes that you write about?
So you can find it via the link on my LinkedIn page. There's the little green hyperlink. You can take you to it. The common themes I would say are how to become a more influential individual as a data leader inside a company that perhaps isn't data centric yet. Which I think, if you look at some of the statistics, something like 85% of organizations are like fit under this localized analytics definition, which is they have some dashboards, they have some Excel, they have some very minimal data capabilities, but where they really need to get to is much further along, and it's a really large proportion of companies that are actually completely immature in terms of data. So I think that I'm probably speaking to most organizations when I say these are the sorts of challenges that you need to overcome to get there. I talk about, what's a good example? Data, for example, is continually seen in a lot of organizations as a service desk kind of function, where people wait around for requests for data, requests for reports, requests for dashboards to come in. And I think that this is an unfortunate dynamic for it's very frustrating for a lot of data people to be seen like that, because they know that data is actually far more powerful if it can be used in a much more effective way. So I guess the crux of what people need to be doing is demonstrating value with data in a much more powerful way than they currently do. I think that if you sit and wait around for questions to be asked of you as a data team or as a data leader, you're just ticking boxes and you're just making certain individuals happy for a few moments until they need something again. What we really need to be doing is kind of maybe saying no to a lot of that and spending our time on actually trying to understand what challenges the business itself is facing or each of the domains are facing and solving for those problems without waiting to be asked to help on specific things.
Great. Well, what any final bits of advice? Maybe how can people get in touch with you to work with you as well?
Yeah, the best way is just via LinkedIn. I'm pretty much on there every day. If I love talking to people. I'm hopefully very approachable. So just hit me up, drop me a DM or send me an email from my website, which you can find the link on my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, yeah, and I'll include that in the show notes as well. So Tris, thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation and good luck in the solopreneurship. And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, sounds great, Andy. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
You're welcome.